Welcome to another edition of the Rushed Behind's Top 10 Countdown. This week we're looking at our picks for the top 10 biggest one-hit wonders. And jinkies, blinking you'd miss some of these miracle moments. We're looking at the players who burst onto the scene in dramatic fashion before fading into obscurity, as well as some of footy's one-time fads which died out just as quickly and were never seen again. Well, now you know this isn't a musical one-hit wonders countdown and won't feature absolute classics like Stacey's Mum, Come On Eileen and Who Let the Dogs Out. Let's dive right in.
Well, Billie Jean claimed she was the one, but Billy James actually was the one.
Kicking off this week's countdown is a groovy number from 1920. Before Marlon Pickett's memorable debut in the last week of September turned heads, Richmond's Billy James recorded his own extraordinary grand final debut 99 years prior. The pint-sized Tiger, who actually played in a flag team for Kyabram the week before, booted the match-sealing major to secure the Yellow and Black's inaugural premiership. But astonishingly, it would be his one and only game at league level.
One game, one goal, one grand final. Looking pretty good for Billy James. Things looking quite rosy. That was until, as the old famous footy story goes, he was accidentally shot in the foot by a colleague, you'd imagine former colleague, after that little mishap on a hunting expedition in the off-season in 1921. So that was apparently the reason why he only played the one game for Richmond.
But just 2 years ago, the famous footy tale was debunked as a myth, with the infamous gunshot wound occurring in 1925, 5 years after his famed flag debut. So why did he leave Richmond? Well, the reasons aren't fully clear, but James did return to Kyabram to win back-to-back premierships in 1921 and 1922. No matter what, it's a pretty good way to ride off into the sunset.
If I were making my AFL debut, I'd want it somewhere quiet, in a game that no one was watching, and somewhere where I can feel comfortable and at home and ease into the game wonderfully. So playing North Melbourne at Etihad is a big tick in that regard.
Sounds like the dream debut for you, Athos, except you're actually missing the footy talent, I think. But one man who wasn't short of footy talent in his debut game was Fremantle's Ryan Nyhouse, who exploded onto the scene to give the Dockers a memorable victory under the roof in 2017. The late replacement for David Mundy booted 4 goals on debut, including the last 2 goals of the game.
But seriously, what I love about this one is Ryan was a defender, and they put him at full forward and he kicked 4 goals.
Ryan Nyhouse, in his first game, the late inclusion for his first goal. He's been a defender all his life and he's kicked a goal in 5 minutes.
I think 3 of those 4 goals were set shots when, if you're playing your first game, it's quite hard, regardless of how many people are there. What is even more amazing is he helped Fremantle win the game, kicked the last 2 goals. One of them was on the run from 50 metres out.
As well as entering Freo footy folklore, Nyhouse joined the exclusive First Goal, First Kick club before ramming home his 2 miraculous match winners. And even though the young Docker only played 12 games over 3 seasons, his first is something the Purple Army will always remember.
Marvel Stadium was Nyhouse, and Freo went on to win the game, and unfortunately for Ryan Nyhouse now, he's not on Fremantle's list anymore, but be forever remembered for kicking 4 goals in that one game.
That's the best thing I've ever done in my footy career.
Well, hold the phone right there, Fitzy. As great as that disallowed goal was, and it probably should have been counted by the way, Ryan Fitzgerald's first senior game was something to remember. A 5-goal bag against St Kilda in 2000 was the perfect way to open the account. Sorry Fitzy, you've got some extra info for us?
My first kick was a goal and my second kick was a goal. And can I just say, Nyhouse, not a bad effort, but not up there. While we're talking about debuts, why not we talk about some of the greatest AFL debuts?
Here we go. Well, Fitzy's not wrong. He does hold the record for the most goals by a debutant from 2000 onwards, so pretty good in that regard. Big things were touted for Fitzy. He was taken to pick 4, big power forward, a lot of upside for him, but just couldn't quite get a run at it. Crippled by injuries, had a brief run at the Crows, just couldn't get it going, but we all know what he's doing today.
After his footy career came to a close, Fitzy appeared as a contestant on Big Brother in 2004, before landing his own radio show at Nova, appearing on Before the Game and becoming one of Australia's most popular media personalities.
He has since become Australia's #1 radio personality and an incredibly funny comedian, and does all sorts of incredible things, and things that wouldn't have happened if he had played AFL. So all things happen for a reason, and Fitzy certainly made the most of it.
This one was such a one-hit wonder, it only lasted one round. In a bid to make Australia's unique game just like every other sporting code in the world, the AFL decided to trial player names on the back of Guernseys in 2014. It's fair to say that the reception to that seemingly minor change was one of great controversy, and has even divided our own panel.
Now, this is very controversial, but I love the names on the back of the jumpers. I think the AFL is one of the only sports in the world that don't have names on the back of their jumpers, and I don't see why not.
The names, they were a nice idea, a nice gesture, like they meant well, so that we could tell who the players are, or the players could tell who the players are. I don't know what they were thinking, but it was an okay addition, and the fact that people got quite upset and quite ill-tempered about it shows how small-minded we are as a sporting community.
I wonder what our anti-European football code correspondent Chris has to say about this one.
Player names on the backs of Guernseys is just the most redundant idea. Just leave it alone. Leave it alone. The idea of the number is that it's passed down and it's not really owned by anyone. And for another thing, if you're that close to actually read that tiny little font, then you can probably identify the player with or without, their name on the back. And here's another thing. I know Tom Hawkins ran out of Guernseys on this day, but that's clearly not Josh Walker. That's Tom Hawkins. So, look, if he didn't have the name on the back, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. It's not really that big of a deal anyway. I'm just trying to impress a point. So the number for me will always win out. That being said, this does look pretty cool, doesn't it?
Silver, how did you earn that one, Nishay?
Well, funny you should ask, Will. It's actually a story from a few years back involved with...
Yeah, look, I really don't care, mate. In the end, it was practical limitations, like the unique cuts, emblems and sponsors on each club's Guernsey, and the length of player names that saw the concept abandoned. That being said, they were revived for a certain format of footy some years later, but more on that coming up. Now, if you thought Ryan Nyhouse's debut was something special, get a load of this 8-goal stunner from John Georgiadis. Georgiadis almost kicked more goals than he had letters in his surname to single-handedly give Footscray an amazing win over the Blues in round 1, 1989. And against Stephen Silvani, no less.
You make your debut against Carlton in 1989, you got the big last name, you got the name that would sum you up as a cult figure, Georgiadis, and you're playing against Carlton, against one of the greatest defenders of all time in Stephen Silvani, and you kick 8 goals in your first game. John Georgiadis could have been anything.
Unbelievably, only 3 players in the league's history have kicked more goals on debut. John Coleman with 12, and Bill Wood and Warren Ralph with 9. Unfortunately, it was Georgiadis' one and only crowning moment. He was delisted after just another 14 games for the red, white and blue.
Now, John wasn't able to have the AFL career he dreamed of, but his son Mitch was just drafted to the Power and played round 1, so hopefully Mitch can continue where his dad left off.
Boy, oh boy, wowee! Talk about an explosive start. North Melbourne's Adrian McAdam was the very definition of a flash in the pan, booting 68 goals in his first 17 games in a forward line that featured heavy hitters Wayne Carey and John Longmire. But incredibly, these two Star-roos would play second fiddle to the NT recruit in 1993.
Adrian McAdam's numbers are absolutely ludicrous. 7 goals in his first game, 10 in his second, and then 6 in his third. Who does that?
His 23 goals in the first 3 games still stands as an all-time record.
Tell you what, that is the personification of that one-hit wonder, because he literally was there and gone in the blink of an eye.
Unfortunately, McAdam was unable to recapture the form of his first season and was delisted in 1995 after just 36 games. A little bit of double trouble for this one, with 2 miraculous one-off performances solidifying these 2 young men into club folklore. Port Adelaide's John Butcher and the Western Bulldogs' Jason Tutt turned the 2011 dead rubber on its head, booting a combined 10 goals.
Jason Tutt kicks 4 goals. Goal with his first kick. He's in that illustrious club. But John Butcher said, I'm going to one-up you. He kicked 6 goals with 6 kicks. And he went on to kick 10 goals in 2 games. The Doggies won the game easily, but John Butcher and Jason Tutt will be forever remembered for that, because they didn't do much else for the rest of their careers, and the Power fans, they thought, we've got the next Warren Treadway right here. This is great heading into the future, considering things are very bleak at the moment.
Talk about efficiency from Butcher. 6 goals from just 6 kicks. Jiminy Christmas. Jason Tutt was adored by AFL fantasy diehards after his 147-point masterclass, which included 26 touches and 4 goals to give the Dogs the W, while Power fans were even more optimistic surrounding the prospects of their new key forward.
They even nicknamed him The Future. No, seriously, that was his nickname, The Future. Quite original and quite witty from those Port Adelaide supporters. Unfortunately for them, the future wasn't so bright, and he wasn't able to get to those heights again, and played the rest of his career in the reserves before being delisted in 2016.
Butcher's name still lingers in the footy record books after suffering the heaviest defeat on debut, 165 points against Hawthorn. But who cares? Those 6 goals are what we're all here for.
I was there for this one and was very excited when an 18-year-old Dean Polo won the Tigers the game against the Bombers. It was Dreamtime at the G, a massive occasion, and he certainly rose to it in his first game.
That he absolutely did. Dean Polo turned it on in front of almost 60,000 supporters in the 2006 Dreamtime game to become one of the most talked about debutants ever. Polo racked up 28 disposals and slotted 3 goals to lead the Tigers to a thrilling 2-point win over their old rivals, picking up the Yukon Award and the NAB Rising Star nomination. Polo remained in the system for another 6 seasons at the Tigers and at St Kilda, but never was able to reach the heights of his masterful debut under lights. Well, I think that pretty much wraps this one up, guys. Anything else to add?
Well, I'm just happy no one whipped out a Marco Polo joke. I know it would have been very tempting, but, we're better than that.
Essendon were yelling Marco, but Richmond were not yelling Polo. Not for that way to find him, because they couldn't get near him.
Just going out on a limb here, that made no sense. But nevertheless, what an absolute blinder from Polo. Oh, far out, Nick.
The winner of the Anzac Day medal for 2002 is Mark McGough of the Collingwood Football Club. A terrific effort from this young 17-year-old.
Now, if you're after an even bigger stage than Dreamtime at the G, look no further than Anzac Day. And if you want an almost better first season game than that of Dean Polo, look no further than Collingwood's Mark McGough.
Mark McGough starred in some of the most horrendous conditions you'll ever see out on a footy field. Had 24 touches in the wet, wins the Anzac Day medal, and it's only his second game. That's mind-blowing.
The miraculous medal-winning display in the wet and miserable conditions was described by coach Mick Malthouse as his favourite Anzac Day memory from his time as coach.
I don't know what Mark McGough was having with his cornflakes at 17, but whatever it was, it helped him play the best game of his young career on Anzac Day at the MCG against two fierce rivals, with 90,000 people there. It was an incredible individual performance and is still highly regarded because it was Anzac Day, the biggest home and away game of the season, and here's this 17-year-old with guys like Buckley and Hurd and Rocker and all these great players, and he stood out above the rest on this day, so fair play to him.
Unfortunately, the dream run didn't last, with McGough delisted by the Pies at the end of 2004 and then by the Saints after 2 seasons.
Now, I don't remember much of Mark McGough from being a kid, but that's in Collingwood folklore that Mark McGough came out, had that huge game. Collingwood came away with a 5-goal win in some of the toughest conditions that I've seen, and he was, that's all he had to do. It didn't turn out the way his career probably was hoping to be. Didn't even play in the grand final that year, Mark McGough, even the next year as well for Collingwood. So he had that one big moment, forever remembered for it, but he was a handy player that day, so didn't really have to do much else, and even if he only played maybe less than 50 games for Collingwood, he's forever going to be down as a legend in the club footy in 2002.
Now, as far as individual performances go, this one is definitely a number one in terms of phenomenal one-hit wonders. But we've got one more moment up our sleeves which we think you might remember, or at least are trying to forget. Roll the tape. Stylish player entrances, Gatorade game changers, square field, launch zones, super duper goals. What? AFLX? Oh boy, this was something else entirely, wasn't it? AFLX was first introduced in the 2018 pre-season in an attempt to appeal Australia's game to a wider international audience. But it's fair to say the trend didn't quite catch on. The amended format of the game had fans around the country up in arms over the Mickey Mouse competition, many refusing to warm to the radical new idea.
In 2018, no one could give 2 hoots about AFLX, just let it go. But then 2019 just became jazzed up to the max. They had fireworks shooting out of goals, they had beanbags, you had DJs, cheerleaders, weird mascots, new teams, everything. Just they pulled out the whole kit and caboodle, and no one really warmed up to it either. I was there in 2019, watching on. Look, from the stands, it was like watching training just with a few more theatrics. Look, the players certainly had fun, and they put on a great show, and some of the highlights there are pretty staggering stuff. But just on the whole, this just was never going to work, and not many people were going to ever get around it.
By the way, could I also get an explanation as to what the X in AFLX stands for? Extreme? Exciting? X-Factor? X-rated? I've still got no clue. In 2019, AFLX underwent an extensive makeover. See what I did there? To include brand new teams, Bolts, Rampage, Deadly and Flyers, and cram in as many wacky, tacky and obscure quirks to make it stand out.
No one really got around the AFLX unless you were like 6. It was bright, it was colourful, there were less players. I'm sure the players had fun, they got to run around, but aside from that, no one really took much interest in it. I mean, it can't really even be a one-hit wonder because it wasn't even very successful. It was like a flop, just a general flop. Like, they did recover it the year later with the Rampage and the Flyers, and everyone had a bit of fun, I guess, seeing the players banter and, have a laugh together, but we're not getting that back. So, one-hit wonder, maybe.
And let's not forget that creepy mascot.
Pre-season football that was completely glorified and big bashified, if that's a word, to try and make it more exciting. In fact, I found it rather boring. I found it rather crap. So, yeah, I'm glad it's gone. But the one thing I remember, just that footy, it's like, to this day I still get nightmares about the footy. Those eyes, man, they're staring and you're burning you in your skin. I feel it right now.
And while the competition may have given fans some nightmares, AFLX was abandoned ahead of season 2020. But is there a chance of a return? Well, until it does, this is without a doubt a deserving number one for the biggest one-hit wonders in our game's history.